So guys, you made it. Last session of the day, almost done. Hopefully you are enjoying the event. And in this session, I will spare you from the PowerPoint slides. No slides, okay? I will do mostly demos. And my name is Alex Vieira. I'm a global black belt at Microsoft. The global black belt is a curious role inside a company that we work very closely with engineering and closely with customers to understand what they are doing and to bring that feedback loop into engineering so that the products could evolve over time. Is a little bit like left brain, right brain side of the company. And in this session, we will talk about AI. Everyone talks about AI nowadays. And we'll talk about MCP as well, because as most likely if you already know, MCP plays a big role in this in AI and when building agents. So we have been seeing a lot of sessions during the days about how to build new apps, how to build new agents, right? And we've seen already, it's like it was never a better time to be a developer. It's amazing what we can build already with vibe coding, software, spec-driven development, all these kind of things that we see here in the left side of the screen. And then on the right, you have all these LLMs that we can use, right? The different models that we have one every day. Last week alone, OpenAI just released a bunch of new models. But then we know that we need knowledge, we need data to combine the models with that knowledge. And then the part that I'm most interested in, to combine with tools, right? Initially, we thought about function calling, an awesome feature that OpenAI introduced. And then we thought about calling open APIs. And then Anthropic came with the MCP, the Model Contracts Protocol, that makes much simpler for LLMs to call the tools. And in this middle, right, between this relation between the apps and the agents calling the models, the data, and the tools, of course, we have a lot of challenges. In particular, when there are agents that are autonomous, calling different models, different data, different tools. Of course, everyone is concerned about this. I guess no one in the audience will trust an AI agent automatically. They will want to supervise, they will want to monitor, they want to set guardrails on what the agent can do. And of course, to try to mediate this relation, okay, Microsoft, but the industry in general, a lot of players are investing in this, that the industry is calling the AI gateway component, in general terms, okay? Something that sits in the middle, like a gateway, that will mediate this relation between apps and agent, calling different models, data, tools, etc. And we have been seeing these different cross-cutting concerns that the AI gateway has. Something around security, of course, obvious, right? It needs to add security, but observability, a big part. We want to observe, we want to monitor what's happening, and a lot of different things. And it was curious that Microsoft thought about, okay, how we will fill in this space. Should we create a new product category? Should we reuse something? In the end, they end up reusing a service, an Azure service, that has already 10 years of existence, that is called the Azure API Management, and build new capabilities on top of this service, okay? The cool thing is that all those capabilities added were without any extra price. It's the same service, just with more capabilities with AI. And over the last months, they added a bunch of new features. And the goal for the team is a little bit to provide this balance, right? In AI, if you don't have velocity, you are dead, right? You need velocity. You have a new model, you need to ship it really fast. So, and the expectations from all of you in this field is they are very high. But then, if it's not reliable, most likely you will not trust the service, right? So they try to combine these 10 years of reliability with the cutting edge features. And they put it like a release channel so that you have the latest and greatest, but you control how these features go into production. And a lot of new features have been introduced over the past year and something, and some new ones in preview. And if you see the roadmap, we have a lot more coming in this field. And basically, the commitment of the team at this point is for these different cross-cutting concerns when consuming the AI models, for us to have more and more features into the service. And now I want to show you, okay, that's great, service from within Azure. Most of you are developers, so how do I use this, right? So to use it is pretty simple. And in this demo, in most of the scenarios, when we are consuming AI models, we start in the Azure story, we start with Foundry. That's where we will see the models that Microsoft provides as a service, right? And over these last months, Microsoft has been doing a lot of partnerships, initially with OpenAI, then with Meta and others. And now you see here 12,000 models already provided here in this catalog. So models for all different tastes, specialized models for different needs. And when you go to Foundry, you go to this section here, model and endpoints. And from here, you just deploy a base model. From this list, you pick the model that you want, and you'll basically deploy the model, okay? And then you have the models here in the list. As you can see here, I have a bunch of them here. That, of course, which model should you choose? You should do evals, you should do benchmark to understand which model is the most appropriate one, but also embrace change, right? Because you might pick a model initially because it's the best model for the job, but as new models are being constantly released, you should embrace a continuous kind of change management, a continuous like LLM ops process, so that by doing evals, you always understand what's the best model for the job. More on that later. So I have configured the models, okay, in Foundry. And now, when I go to the API management service within Azure, I have an instance already here provisioned, but it's a typical experience in Azure. You create a new service, and you configure where you want the service to be running, and the service then it's running as a managed service. We go here to the APIs, and we have a nice option here that is creating an API from Azure AI Foundry, right? That's where the models were just deployed. It starts to ask which Foundry resource do I want to use. And if I click in this one, I see the same models that I was seeing previously that were deployed because it's the same resource that I've configured. So I want to use this one. I'll give it a name. Okay, it can be whatever name you want. Typically, I want to expose the inference API as an API that I will mediate. So maybe something related to inference might make sense. I'll call it here inference. And then I can configure, and that's the interesting part, right? In a lot of circumstances, one of the top use cases, you want to limit how much tokens can be consumed by the model. Because imagine different developers here, all of them will consume these models. I want to set limits. I might want to set a quota in order to avoid like surprises in the end of the month that there's one team member that exploded the token usage, right? That's the typical scenario that we want to set these kind of guardrails. So we might set the tokens per minute, we might set the token quota, and we might limit for different things. Subscription is a typical concept, not to be confused with Azure subscription. It's a concept inside API management that basically says who is the subscriber, who is the user that is consuming the API, and in this case, the models, right? So if each one of you has their own subscription, then I will assign an API key to each one of you, right? And then when you make the call, I know exactly who you are, and I can set limits by each individual. And then I can track token usage in order to do monitoring, to know exactly how much prompt completions, how much prompt tokens, completion tokens, etc. And I can use different dimensions for this, user ID, etc. I will stick with the subscription ID. And then a nice feature as well is to enable semantic caching, where with the semantic caching, I will just configure a model deployment that does embeddings, okay? And basically the semantic caching will evaluate the similarity between different prompts. And if they are similar, according to a threshold that I will configure, the completion that was stored in the cache will send right away to the request. What's the advantage? I save tokens, and the response time is much faster, improving the user experience. And I'm configuring this, just with this a bunch of clicks. Here, setting the similarity score, and as a typical cache, I will configure the time to live for the cache. I can also enable the AI content safety, okay? Typically for models in Foundry, doesn't make a lot of sense because Foundry includes already the content safety built in. But imagine that I'm using this for models on Hugging Face, or for models that I'm hosting, my own, okay, with my own GPUs, and then I want to prevent jailbreak attacks or to prevent sensitive information to be sent to the model, so I can apply the content safety filter before calling the LLM. I will skip the content safety for now, and I will create, okay? This kind of wizard that I can do in the UI, I can automate all this with infrastructure as code or with the CLI so that I don't need to do kind of ClickOps development. So the API was created. Underneath, it uses a policy that uses XML, not the most typical format in nowadays, right? But 10 years ago, reliability, stability, it was built on this. And the good thing is that AI is great to generate this XML as well if you want. It's integrated with GitHub Copilot, with Copilot on Azure, and it works well with GitHub Copilot as well, so that from here, I can understand which policies are built here in my API and generate new policies automatically as well, okay? So this is what the wizard created. So the next thing probably that you are thinking is, does this work? Let's do a simple test to check if it works. And it asks for the deployment ID. Remember here, I have a bunch of model deployments. I could pick any one, but let me talk about this one, model router, because I think it's very interesting. Because at times, we want to put the intelligence of picking the model on the platform. And this is what model router does. Depending on the prompt, okay, it will evaluate the prompt and will select the best model for the prompt that was sent. Okay, that is neat, right? So it optimizes automatically based on the prompt. So it's called model router. Let me pick this name. And if I put here deployment ID, okay, and then it has this, the typical question. Let me put here maybe a little bit more than 15 tokens. And I'm testing the API directly from Azure API Management. I see that I have a 200, okay, that's awesome. I can see here the full JSON response with the model, and I can see here what was the actual model that was used by the model router. So in this case, because it was a very complicated prompt, it just selected GPT-5 Nano. But if it was like a prompt that it was worth to have reasoning, it could pick like GPT-03, for example, okay? And then we will see here the completion tokens, etc. Interesting part as well, I can do a trace. And if I do a trace, I will see these policies that API management configure, like the semantic caching evaluated automatically. I can see that it's working from here, but what typical happens with AI and with AI engineers is that, of course, they don't use that UI to test the models. Most likely, they use an SDK, like the OpenAI SDK is very popular, but might be LangChain or any other framework. So here is a short snippet of Python code. Who develops in Python here? Not a lot. And .NET? A lot more. So I'm sorry, but this is Python. But Python is very easy to understand. And so using this Python SDK, I'm just calling the SDK. But what is the trick that I'm doing here? Instead of sending the endpoint being the Foundry endpoint where the model is hosted, I'm sending the API management gateway URL instead, okay? A configuration change. What is the second change? Anyone guesses what's the second change in this? The API key, thank you. So the API key is not the API key provided by Foundry, it's the API key provided by API management. That is the subscription key. And then between API management and Foundry, it uses a managed identity that doesn't need keys, like keyless. It's a better approach. And here I use the API key mostly to identify the consumer of the model, the subscriber of the model. So if I call this, yeah, I have a response from the model. That's great. Now if I test this with a bunch of requests, after some time I start to receive 429s. What this means that the token rate limit was exceeded, the thing that I wanted to provoke. I put the default value like 1,000 tokens. It's very low. And then here, if I analyze the over time, I can see this trend, right? The tokens were counting. It passed the threshold of 1,000, and then I start to receive 429, okay? I received the 429 until the tokens are refreshed again, and then it continues. Is this kind of test that, you know, as the developers, it's important for us to understand the difference and the way it works. For example, a small detail here, if I call the OpenAI SDK to do the same thing, the SDK has a retry logic, so I don't see the 429 error, because it will wait until I have tokens again available. So instead of being like 1 second latency, it will be like 20 seconds. Why? Because it's doing the retry logic underneath. Let me show you also the semantic caching that I think is really cool. So in terms of architecture, we have the chat completions model, like might be the model router or GPT-5, but then we have an embeddings model that will create the embeddings. And the way it works is that if the prompt is not on the cache, if the prompt is not on the cache, it will calculate. It goes to the completion. It will get the completion and store in the cache. If it's in the cache, we'll have a cache sheet and it will answer automatically. This is just the policy configuration that I just show you. By default, it uses Azure Managed Redis. By coincidence, we are having a session with Managed Redis in the other room. And now if I run this, a couple of runs, I will see that it takes a little bit of time, the first request, and then the others are very fast. If you see here the prompts, okay, that are random, you can see that the prompts are different in text, but the meaning is the same. All of them, they ask mostly the same question. And depending on the similarities threshold, you might give the same answer. So the first one, the first question was like, the first question, it was very slow, 70 seconds, and then was below 1 second, the other ones. Okay, so if now I'm doing here this, I can see the difference, and the difference is absurd, right? So in a lot of circumstances, this gives a lot of advantage with minimal effort. And you know how users are, they go to the chat and they say hello, right? Or they They do the same questions. If it's like an e-commerce kind of site, they will ask, oh, what's the price of product X? You might store that on the cache. And by having this, right, we let me go here to. By having this, then we can be confident that my API is ready to send to the developers, right? And I will be confident that I will be able to monitor what's happening in terms of token consumption about usage. In fact, we have a built-in dashboard, okay? That if you go to the API management, you go to the analytics part, and we have a language model section that is built in with observability. I will understand automatically how much from tokens, completion tokens, total tokens, etc. have I consumed. I can understand metrics by models, metrics by the subscribers, etc. All this is available through logs, okay? Using the underlying Azure Monitor logs from Azure. So nothing to be done. This is already set it up. I just need to consume this. Yeah, the typical screen that we don't need at this point. And here we can see the data in raw and use this data automatically. I had a bit of fun with these logs. And in this thing called vibe coding, I think you have heard about this already today. I built an extension on Visual Studio Code just to explore this, the gateway, how much tokens are being consumed, etc. And basically, you can see here the subscriptions, you can see the models, the backends. And by consuming this table, it's easy to build this kind of UI and having filters by the models, understanding exactly the request prompt, completion, etc. So you can do this kind of customizations for your own scenario so that you can really understand how AI is being used in your company. So that's great. Let's think now about the other subject, right? That is the tools and the model context protocol. I like this analogy because I'm here for some time already, and I started with floppy disks. With floppy disks, we were making a program, and we were putting the binaries in the floppy disk. And then with the USB stick, was a little bit thinking about the installer, right? We put the installer on the floppy disk, and we thought about XML already, and SOAP as a communication protocol when systems interact with each other. And then the mobile revolution came. That's when we started to see REST APIs with JSON everywhere, and a lot of SaaS companies emerging. And now I believe the AI agents and AI agents using not REST, not web services or SOAP, they are using mostly the model context protocol. It was a protocol initiated by Anthropic, and Anthropic made a tremendous work here. And the interesting part as well from that is that open to the community, okay? And companies like Microsoft embraced this new protocol. And in fact, MCP across Microsoft is a big thing now, okay? And you can see here a lot of different product areas that are totally all in on MCP. And because, of course, we see the industry moving in this direction. And by the way, it's not just adopting the protocol, contributing to the MCP. So I have a lot of colleagues that are part of the MCP steering committee, driving what will be the evolution of MCP. So you see here, Azure API Management, also Azure API Center, GitHub Copilot, and a bunch of other services like Foundry. And then in this demo, let's think about now. I don't need to expose the AI model. I've done that already. I want to expose MCP tools, right? That's my goal for for this demo. So if I go again to the my API management instance, you see here that behind APIs we added this new blade that we called MCP servers. It's still in preview. We should put this GA in a couple of months. And there are two nice capabilities here that before deleting this one, because I want to create this from scratch, let me delete this one. Okay. So I can see here my existing MCP servers, and then I can expose an existing MCP server or expose an API, an existing API, as an MCP server. Okay? Both things make sense. You might develop your own MCP server using .NET, for example, or Python, or any other languages, with your own business logic, or you might have existing APIs that you might want to transform automatically as MCP servers. So I will start with that one. I have here the weather API. In this world, the weather API is like the hello world kind of API. Does it make sense to do a hello world because the model knows what the hello world, but the model doesn't know what's the current weather, right? That's the weather MCP is very popular. So I can do like here weather MCP and create, okay? So very easy. I just created my MCP server. I can see here that I have configuration with my operations. In this case, I just have an operation. I will show examples with more operations. And then I can configure policies, the same policies with the same XML logic, to set rate limit, to set conditions when the MCP tool might be called or not, okay? And then I have also this possibility to go here and expose an existing MCP server. There is a popular one from Microsoft that is the Learn, okay, from the Learning Microsoft site. That is an MCP server by itself. And here I will say that is the MS Learn MCP, and I can just call it Learn, and we'll create the MCP. So in this case, it's more like a proxy of an MCP, an existing MCP that I'm proxying. What's the advantage? Again, putting policies, putting guardrails. Imagine that the agent is calling the MCP tool, right? At a certain stage, you might set limits. Imagine that is an MCP tool that does an order or does a payment. You might set that if the payment is above $50, you might want to have like a manual approval. Otherwise, it's an automatical approval. So you set this kind of guardrails within the policies. So now that that I've created the MCP tool, I will use a tool that is very popular. That is the MCP Inspector. It is with the MCP community. They release this tool that is some kind of the source of truth if an MCP tool really works or not, right? An open source tool that is became very popular. I will go here, I will copy paste the same link, and I will do connect, okay? So it's connected. MCP underneath, it uses JSON RPC, okay? So it uses streamable events to send this information. So it has this concept of a connection. And now that I'm connected, I can go here and see which tools this MCP server provides. In this case, it's this Microsoft Docs search. I can see the tool, and I can put a query here, right? Like, what is Azure API Management? And I do run the tool. Okay, I ran the tool, and nothing spectacular. I have like a success, and I have an answer. That is the answer that the MCP server provided. And when the model calls the MCP tool, basically we'll have this answer, right? With the title, with the content, and that's then how the models will interpret these tools. that's awesome. I can see that the tool is working. Maybe another way for me to show that these tools work is going into GitHub Copilot and to configure the tool here, like I can do with this one. I can see that I have configured the MCP server weather, okay, with my get current weather information. So if I come here now and ask like, what's the weather in Lisbon, it will ask the model for this information. It shows me which tool is using, the tool that I've just configured. And then, because I'm a lazy developer, it will provide random weather information. Just to prove that you can do this with any MCP tool that you might create in the enterprise. And in fact, this is really powerful because what I've seen with a lot of customers is that you have a lot of knowledge bases, you have a lot of knowledge spread in the company. And if you enable that knowledge through MCP tools, then they just go, and I'm doing this in GitHub Copilot, but can be Cursor or Cloud Code or whatever, because all of them, they support MCP tools. And then all that knowledge through the MCP tools, they are provided to the developers automatically, okay? That's really powerful, and when doing spec-driven development and when building applications and agents, that's what I believe that will be the trend. So I can see that the tool also works from GitHub Copilot, but that's not the typical scenario that I will say when using these tools. I see that in a lot of scenarios, the tools will be used by agents, right? So I will use an agent framework, and there are plenty of agents framework out there. I will use the one from AI Foundry that I've configured here with a bunch of code, but you can see here in this section that I've defined an MCP tool that is my weather information, okay? The same weather information that I've configured. I'm passing this to my agent to use this tool. And if I run this with a prompt that is, what's the weather in Lisbon, Cairo, and London? A little bit more sophisticated question. It will create the agent. It will create a thread for the agent, create a message, and then it will iterate in the response, and then I will have an answer, okay? So raw format, not pretty thing. I'm a developer. I want to see, what is the output in raw format, and I can see that the answer was good. But if I'm going to here to Foundry, I can go to the agents part, and I can see my agents that I've created, okay, and the threads for the different agents, and I can click, and I can see the message that was sent, and I can try it on the playground, and I can see this nice thing, thread logs, and I can see the interaction and the tools that were called. So it was 3 cities, so it called the tool 3 times, okay? That's how we can see that the model was smart. He understood that you need to call the tools 3 times. And we can do the tracing. This is using open telemetry. This is how we steer the model, to use these tools. So that's how I create an agent to use the MCP tools, and the agent will use the models that will consume the tokens, right, the initial part, and the agent will call the MCP tools. And the gateway is serving both. The same gateway is serving the models and is serving the tools. You might ask about the data. That is an important part that I didn't touch in the demonstration. My guess is that over time, data will be served through MCP as well, okay? Even vector search will be MCP servers as well over time. So it will be just MCP tools and models, in my opinion. And let's see one more demo. And in this one, it's a little bit more sophisticated. That's why it's a video, not a live demo. And I'm using another API, okay, that in this case, let me go here quickly just to show this. In this case is this one. A lot of things already here configured. Two interesting things here, right? In this one, I'm calling the Spotify API. The Spotify API provided by Spotify. I just imported the Open API spec from Spotify, done. But one important thing about the Spotify API, it needs a token, right? It needs a token that the user needs to authenticate, someone needs to authenticate on behalf of the user to call the API. And API management has a nice feature here that is called the credential manager, that you configure these credential managers to generate tokens automatically with different identity providers, okay? For example, Spotify just uses this OAuth 2, okay? Very simple, generic. But if you use Google, you might select this one and a lot of others. In the Microsoft world should be this one. We should have changed this to Microsoft Enter ID at this point, but it's still Azure Active Directory. So we configured this, and I configured this for Spotify, okay? And I also created an MCP server for the Spotify API that I will do now here. So I will create my Spotify API. And then I have all the operations that the Spotify provides, okay? And here I will just select a bunch of them, and I will call it Spotify. So and also an important thing here as well. There is a very cool API that OpenAI created, and we provide it on Azure. That is the real-time API that allows us to do real-time conversation with an agent where we can send text, but also audio, and having like a real voice conversation over this. That's why I did the recording, because in this kind of environments that is noisy, doesn't work very well. It grabs the noise from elsewhere. So then I configured the credential manager to handle the OAuth server, so that whenever I call the Spotify MCP, I inject the token automatically, okay? And in this case, I will get my Spotify information. And then I will test this with the real-time API. So I will play the video.
Hey there, I'm your Azure Dev Summit DJ. You can call me DJ Azure. Ready to groove?
Hello. How is the weather outside?
Sun's out in Lisbon, clear skies and a comfy breeze. Perfect for some fresh tunes.
Do you want to suggest some Spotify playlists for my account?
Sure thing. Let's get those playlists. First, we need to authorize your Spotify. Hold on for a sec. Please check the link I've sent to authorize your Spotify account. Once you're done, we'll dive into your playlists.
Okay, I'm authorized.
Here are the playlists I found. Relax on sunny days. 2. Vibe coding on Azure. With today's weather, relax on sunny days sounds perfect. Let's pick one and start the groove.
Let's try vibe coding.
Vibe coding on Azure is now playing. Enjoy the beats.
Okay, let's pause for now.
Enjoy the beats of Azure Dev Summit.
So in this demo, the cool thing here is that it's not much different from using other models and other APIs. This one is the real-time API that has a voice live conversation. And the cool thing here is combining then with the MCP tools as well. That in this case, I used two. The weather MCP tool, that in this case, I did a little bit, the current weather, and I recorded that I'm on Lisbon, so My MCP server was hard-coded to give the information for Lisbon. And then the Spotify, that was the real Spotify API. Nothing changed there, right? That's why I was able to play the music automatically, because it uses the Play API, and it plays music on the active device. And I think this combination is really powerful, right? And we have seen just last week, OpenAI announcing the apps on the ChatGPT, where you can say, oh, build me something on Figma, and then it connects to Figma, and it does the same, right? When connecting to Figma, it will consent for you to log in on Figma. In fact, it shows a demo with Spotify as well. And then you do the consent, generate the token. So the secret piece here is that this API management component is doing the token management for us. Okay. Otherwise, we as developers, we need to handle that part as well. And that's not fun, to handle with those OAuth tokens, because then they expire, and you need to refresh the tokens automatically, etc. So in this case, we are just generating the token, and then grabbing the token and passing through the API, and that facilitates. So all these demos, everything that I've showed here, it's in a repo that I will show in a minute, but I just landed in this tab that I forgot to demonstrate. That is about the registry part. Okay, that is very important. So while we build the different MCP tools across the company, at a certain point, there will be too much MCP tools. Okay, in the same way that the API started to explode in the enterprise. But my perception is that with MCP will be even a bigger explosion, okay? Because as enterprise will face a lot of pressure to build agents, to do digital labor, the agent will need tools to do their work, so there will be a huge demand to build MCP tools across the enterprise. So MCP servers built from scratch, or APIs converted into MCP servers. And you can see here in catalogs like the one from the GitHub. GitHub is having like a public registry of MCP tools, and you will see in the GitHub kind of world, you will see a lot of tools already here, okay? One very good one is this one, Context 7, okay? Very interesting MCP tool, because when you use a tool like GitHub Copilot, a common concern is that, oh, the model was not trained on the last version of a framework that I use, on the JavaScript framework that I've used, so it doesn't produce good code because it was like old code. And that's where tools like Context 7 does an amazing job, because they index repos, the most popular repos with the latest frameworks. And then when you put the Context 7 MCP tool in a tool like GitHub Copilot, it automatically fetches the latest versions of that framework. And that's just an example, right? And this is more like a public kind of MCP tool. And what about the internal enterprise MCP tools that you will develop and you will not want to have them public? So that's where we have this component that we call the API Center, that provides an MCP registry out of the box, okay? It was built to be generic, so it provides support for different API types, but now MCP is a first-class citizen here. And you can go here, for example, the MS Learn API is here, and I can consume this MCP tool, I can see the information, I can see that it's deployed on Azure API Management, I can see the endpoint URL so that I can start using the tool, or I can import into Visual Studio Code automatically, okay? To create these APIs in API Center, it's easy. We just need to go to my API Center here. Whether I integrate with API Management, so that I have an automatic sync. If I create an API management, it will appear in API Center automatically. Or if I want to do this from here, I can register in the UI. Or my favorite method, using infrastructure as code to automate in the CI/CD process, because most likely if you have an MCP server, maybe you have like code associated, you have a CI/CD process, and when the CI/CD runs, it publishes the tool. And then within the enterprise, again, you provide this portal so that everyone in the enterprise knows which MCP tools are available, and with semantic search and with the metadata and with all sorts of ways for you to discover the MCP tools that you have. This is compatible with the Anthropic standard from MCP to do tool discovery. Okay, that's an important piece here. And I was mentioning that all these samples that I've provided here, they are all in the repo. Okay, that is here. And we made this repo open source, okay, so that it can combine all these different labs for the different experiments. And this has been growing over time with all sorts of use cases, because there is not one size fits all in this kind of scenario, are all ranges of different requirements. And this was built so that you can quickly experiment these kind of technologies. Works with Jupyter notebooks, because Jupyter notebooks are great for quick experiments. You do like run all, it's deployed infrastructure, provides tests, and you quickly check if it works for you or not. Okay, so that's what I've been using doing these demos. Even the Spotify demo is here if you want to reuse it. And as a summary, and then we can open for questions. Think about, this gateway. And of course, by being Microsoft, I talk about the gateway for Microsoft. But I believe that this concept of gateway, I think it's industry agnostic, and it will prevail in the industry and will be provided by different vendors. So at a certain point, if you don't like Microsoft, most likely you'll find an equivalent from other vendor. And I think that's the power of the community. When the community drives on these kind of things, they will create standards and create things that are similar, because we don't want to have a decision for life, like, oh, I will go with the gateway from Microsoft, but then if it doesn't work for me, I don't have an alternative. No, it's very good to have alternatives, like the models, right? 12,000 models now, most likely there is one that fits your requirements. So we have this gateway component that now has been expanding not only to serve AI models. That's where it started. Now very important to serve MCP tools. So there are some components that they call the MCP gateway. But think this way, does it make sense to have an MCP gateway and then a gateway for models and maybe a gateway for APIs, and then you need to manage all these gateways? It's added complexity. I think the main point is that at a certain point you want to control agents, right? And agents will consume a lot of models, a lot of tools, a lot of data, and you have a point of control where you monitor, where you set your policies, your guardrails in a single point. And that's the purpose of the gateway. And security, of course, is very important in this regard. Every enterprise agent deployment will fail if you as a developer don't think about security, okay? Nobody will trust the agent. The agent might have a lot of powers, but with great powers comes great responsibility. So safety and security is like a no-brainer. Then reliability, right? For example, we talk about consuming the models, AI models. And as we know, GPUs are a scarce kind of asset, and sometimes we handle a lot of capacity issues when consuming the models. That's why it's important to do token rate limit and these kind of things. But then an entire region or data center might go unavailable by a DNS issue or by any other thing. So having like load balancing capabilities, scaling automatically, it's important. And that's where the gateway is good, to do load balancing, to scale automatically, to do these sort of things. Then things like semantic caching, counting the tokens, you might be more efficient. I believe that where you can be more cost efficient is to choose the best model for the job, right? I work with a lot of customers. Some, they started in a model, and then some months afterwards, I ask, are you still using the same model? And say yes, right? Because we know change is sometimes hard, but what we have seen is that models, they become better and less expensive, right? So why not to change? But of course, you need to do the evals to check if the results are at least equal or better than the other model. And that's where the gateway is very important as well. Because if you put the prompts and you get the completions from the gateway, then you can use those logs to do evals with other new models and to compare the performance of the old model with the new model. If the performance is better, it's a no-brainer to change it because most likely it's less expensive. Developer velocity on board, build the MCP tools really quick, release the models to the developers. And sometimes it's a concern, and with a lot of customers, big customers, oh, I don't want the developers to start using these AI models because I don't have control on what they are using. And they are afraid that a huge bill will suddenly appear, right? But they are, locking the innovation that might come from using those models. So does it make a lot of sense? And using this is a kind of best of both, because they release the models, but with constraints, of course. It's important to have like a limit, have a quota, and then manage that. And overall, of course, the governance is important. Might not be important when you start the project, but as we know, to go into production, this is very important. And what I've seen in most of these situations is this kind of components. Through the project, they are introduced, hopefully without disruption, because it's just a plugin, doesn't change the architecture and doesn't change the way that the application is built. As we have seen, just change the endpoint and the API key, and then we have this governance built in. Okay, so to dive in on the experiment, we have this repo, and thank you very much. It was a pleasure to do the session. I'll be happy to answer questions now or outside, whatever you want. Thank you very much.